Jai Bhim, everyone. My name is Venkat Moroju, and I'm part of Boston Study Group, and I live in Boston here in suburbs. And for those, Boston Study Group is an Ambedkarite organization, primarily focused in the northeastern region of USA, which is like the north of, New York, you usually call Northeast. And primarily, we are a group of people, okay? Most of them are first generation, came through a lot of struggles to come to United States and achieve some success and academically, professionally. And the idea here is we want to really bring Ambedkar Phule ideology, not only Indian diaspora but universalize it. Okay, so in that to that end, we do a lot of these lectures. I mean, this is the Ambedkar lecture series we've been doing for last I think 4 or 5 years, more or less. We do at least once in a month, and we used to do these at Harvard, MIT, and UMass and Brandeis. But since for some time we've been doing Zoom virtually because of the COVID. And then we also participate with a number of these universities. We are fortunate to have some very good universities and engage them and discussions and elevate this to a higher level. So we conduct conferences, talks, and that is our primary advocacy sometimes. And coming to today's lecture, Dr. Gail Omvedt, I shouldn't be saying too much about her because then I'll be stealing all the thunder from the speakers. I think she's an outstanding woman and pioneer in her scholarly contribution to Phule Ambedkarite movement, anti-caste movement, even a lot of gender issues. She is I mean, if I go back and look at she's one of the early people who have written in English a lot about this movement. I know about generation of people who got educated. Only that crop is coming. People like Vivek Kumar, Manisha, all these. Is the next generation, right? So it was one of the very early, and coming from Western places, she could really universalize her publications and all that. And I had the fortune of meeting her about 4 or 5 years back. We hosted a lecture at Harvard University. She had by then actually her health was not that great, but still she could speak. So I was very it was fortunate moment for me and actually Sanjay Bhagat, and we all were there. And now today coming to just it's very sad that she passed away a couple of months back, and it's a honor and privilege for all of us to remember her and celebrate her contribution to our movement, and basically further her mission. So without further ado, I mean, we have really distinguished speakers today, Dr. Vivek Kumar and Dr. Manisha Bangar. Just a few words about Vivek Kumar. He's a professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he did his PhD, MA from Jawaharlal Nehru University. And he is a professor and chairperson at the Center for the Social Study of Social Systems, School of Social Sciences, JNU. And he's been a visiting professor at Columbia University and also Humboldt University in Berlin. He works on caste, democracy in India, perspectives below Dalit leadership and Bahujan Samaj Party, and so he is a very prolific writer. He has a long list of publications. But one thing I would like to highlight, having done my own PhD, I did it in very mundane subject like mechanical engineering, but he has supervised 80 PhD and MPhil students so far. I mean, that's for any academician, because I know a little bit about academics, it's an outstanding, success. So he's and still very strong. I mean, he has, I don't know how many more years he'll be, working. So we're expecting a lot more. So he's one of leading scholar in our, ideology. And then coming to Dr. Manisha Bangar, a lot of times she's been a good friend. We know each other for a long time. I hosted, of course, Dr. Vivek Kumar also. I hosted at MIT as, before we were really called Boston Study Group. Same thing, Manisha back in 2007 or 8, I think, right, Manisha, at MIT. And she's been a good friend and fellow activist. And I forget that she's a fantastic physician and doctor. I only know her as academy, like an activist. So she has actually a practicing gastroenterologist. She's done her MBBS from Government Medical College in Nagpur, and then general medicine. And then she did the Doctor of Gastroenterology, or DM you call, from GB Pant Institute, Delhi. And then she has been a passionate activist in furthering Phule Ambedkar ideology. She's been working with BAMSEF for more than 20 years and held many leadership positions at the national level, including national vice president. And she's one of the, I think, leading, what do you call, intellectual physician as well as an activist. So without further ado, I would request, so there are two distinct facets of Dr. Gail Omvedt, Gail Omvedt, if you look at it. She's first, initially, she was a scholar, researcher, and published tons of literature. I think she's, Dr. Vivek Kumar will talk more about it, about 25 books. But she's also, moved to India in the 70s and lived there forever and been a very, very ardent activist on the ground. It amazes me, a lady coming from, United States and taking that type of activist role. So what I asked Dr. Vivek Kumar is going to, initial remarks, is going to talk about her contributions as an academician scholar. And then Dr. Manisha will more focus on her activism. And then we'll have a question and answer session, which will be, open, and we can have a good dialogue. So without further ado, Dr. Vivek Kumar, 15 to 20 minutes, please.
Okay, 20 minutes, fine.
Yeah. I know you professors, this, you give a mic, it's chala jata.
No, I think we are trained to speak at least 55 minutes. That's the class is all about. But I'll not take that time, actually. Yeah. But you should be afraid of Manisha ji, because she is trained to speak at least 1.5 hours in BAMSEF. So, okay, but I'll definitely stick to my time. That is 20 minutes. I think I'm starting now. It's 20:43 according to my watch, actually. So at the outset, let me thank Boston Study Group for giving me this opportunity to pay my floral tribute to Professor Gail Omvedt. Though we have done it in India, but I think at international forum, for me, this is the first program that I'm going to speak. And I specifically thank Venkat Morju for asking me to speak on this topic. And also, I thank him to restrict me for 20 minutes, and that to an academic area. So, at the outset, we definitely pay our floral tribute to Professor Gail Omvedt. But, what I'll do is that I've titled this paper, Gail Omvedt, the sociologist, objective academician, and public intellectual. That is the three aspects which I think is more or less is straight away to academics. Now, in that context, what I'll do is that I'll make very brief, small, or you can say 7 points. And in that 7 points, I will just touch her academic credentials, and then you can definitely ask questions. The first point which I would like to make, history of academic relationship with India. When did it start? history of production of academic knowledge. That is the second. When did she start writing? The third, history of nature of institutional association. When was she appointed for the first time in university? And fourth, Gail's academic contribution in empirical field, the empirical data which she has produced. Fifth, Gail's academic contribution in the theoretical field, the theories which she has used for production of knowledge. And sixth, the academic contributions cuts across the disciplinary boundaries, especially to political science and sociology and history. How does it happen? And last but not the least, construction of Indian version of futuristic society. How she has contributed the utopian or subaltern's utopia for the futurist society. I think these are the 7 points which I will very, very fast touch upon it. So to begin with, the first thing which we come to know that when did she come to India for the first time and when she started? According to her book, but whatever I'm speaking, this is all referential matter. I'm not speaking on hearsay. I'm also not speaking on secondary sources. I'm speaking on the basis what she has said or what it is written in her book. No, I have not taken from anywhere. The second thing is that my personal interaction, which dates back, of course, to 1993 and onwards, actually, we have. And third, actually, we invited her at Jawaharlal Nehru University at the Center for the Study of Social System, School of Social Sciences, to deliver Ambedkar Memorial Lecture. That's what actually we came to know closer. Then I chaired a session in 2015. And then in 2008, I wrote a blurb of her book, which she asked me to write. So that's the way my reflection are going to be. So for the first time, Gail came in 1963. And this I have taken from her book, actually, which is titled Land, Caste, and Politics in Indian States. This is published by Department of Political Science. So 1963, she was 22 years of age, and then actually she started establishing her actually relationship. Her actually academic history of relationship goes back to 1971 when she came for fieldwork and started doing her fieldwork. This was actually, again, I've taken from the first book which she wrote, and this is the book name is Revolt in Colonial India, Cultural Revolt in Colonial Society, the Non-Brahmin Movement in Western India, 1873 to 1930. That's the book I have referred for this, that she came for the first time in 1971 and started doing her fieldwork. However, she started a new journey with her family of procreation since 1978, and then settling down in Kasegao district, Sangli, where her husband Bharat Patankar, and finally taking a citizenship in 1983. So this is a little bit of history, but of course, you know all in US that she hails from Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. On 2nd of August, 1941, she was born. And of course, she completed her PhD from Berkeley, that is University of California, in 1973, March. And then she started walking on her academic journey. So this is a little bit of the history, her association with India. Now, the second point is her institutional association, that history. Gail Omvedt was appointed as professor of sociology in the Department of Sociology in Pune University in 1996. So it took at least 20 years for her to be inducted. So that is an enigma which I don't want to go into detail. But she left within 15 months, according to her. And this is again, I'm taking from her book. She was appointed Ambedkar Chair Professor in Social Work Department in NISWAS, that is National Institute of Social Work, and Bhubaneswar, Orissa in 1997. And according to her, again, she left that place within 16 months. In 2007, Gail Omvedt was appointed as coordinator, supervisor of number of chairs like Ambedkar Chair or Phule Chair by the Vice Chancellor of the Pune University then, but she had to leave because of certain reasons which are not known, but certain people have definitely tried to tell me that actually she was not feeling comfortable. But later on, she took another assignment at Indira Gandhi Open University, and she was appointed as P.R. Ambedkar Chair Professor on Social Change and Development from 2009 to 11. And of course, she was also Senior Fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum Library. But friends, what is important for us that the institutional assignment, for example, she also took international appointments, and she was also actually Asian guest professor in Nordic Institute of Asian Studies, Copenhagen. And later on, she was conferred the Lifetime Achievement Award by Indian Sociological Society in 2018 in the 44th Annual Conference in Mysuru. But what is more important and commendable for us, that when she finished her acceptance speech, she finished with Jai Bhim. That was the mark that, look, she comes from a particular vantage point. Now, coming to the academic contribution, the empirical contribution, I think we can say that she has extended the history, 100 years history of non-Brahminical movement led by Jyotiba Phule and others from 1873 to 1930. That was the time. And later on, she also tried to more than we can say the history of Dalits and OBC, recording ideological, philosophical, and historical contributions to also the another way. Now, this includes not only Jyotiba Phule, but Narayana Guru, Ayodhya Das, Babasaheb Ambedkar, and goes till Kashiram. And this is all actually on the basis of writer. At the historical level, we can say that, she has tried to create a history, and that history is somewhere 3,500 years. And she has reconstructed that history. For academicians like us, it was very difficult to reconstruct history, but she reconstructs that history. I think that is what is empirical data that we as academicians get strength and empowerment. I think that's where we have to look into. Now, coming to the theoretical contributions, I think it is important to look that she was against the caste class question, that you cannot construct class and caste and class equation unless until you have historical stages of development. She criticized that you are trying to develop, especially the Marxist people were trying to develop a caste class equation. She says that no, unless and until you see and take the historical stages of development of the modes of production, you cannot do caste class analysis. It will be sterile. That is the term she uses. The second thing is that she also tries to argue that if you really want to use historical materialism, then we have to incorporate the elements of violence and forces of governments, as Jyotiba Phule has told to us. I think it's very important that how the Marxist frame has to be deconstructed. Lastly, she also suggested that we have to rethink working of capitalist system by taking cognizance of caste, patriarchy, environmental issues, and peasantry and other classes into consideration. If we really want to understand capitalism in Indian society, then we cannot only understand on economic development. Last but not the least, in the study that she said that I discard the functionalist understanding of the social movement. We all know functionalist model is a consensual model, and she rejects that. That's where I think she says that I will adopt a Weberian perspective and also a Marxist perspective. But of course, she was trying to mold that. I don't have time, therefore I'm not going into that detail, but you can definitely ask questions. I will definitely do. Now, coming to another aspect, this was empirical data, her contribution, theoretical data. Now, now I come to the fifth point, or sixth point. The sixth point, that how Gail academic contribution cuts across the disciplinary boundary. And this I have taken from Manoranjan Mohanty because I interviewed him, and he told me that in 1973, when he was doing PhD in Berkeley, they were contemporaries. And that's where a Marxist like Manoranjan Mohanty calls her in Department of Political Science to understand the nuances that how to teach caste and land issues in political science. That's where the discipline moved on, and she produced a wonderful edited volume, which she edited among the Marxists, and that too in political science, though she was a trained sociologist. That's where I'm trying to argue that her academics cuts across the number of disciplines. Now, the another aspect of her contribution is in the history. And historian Nilatri Bhattacharya argues, and I quote directly from him, he says that Omvedt's conception of Dalit as a category may appear problematic to many, but if you read the book, and that's what she was writing, he was writing the foreword of Dalit Vision book, and he writes that if you read the book, then you will be forced to reconsider the ideas, the questions and assumptions which you have about the categories, because there is a very close connection between backward classes and Dalit classes as far as the life and day-to-day interaction is concerned. And therefore, friends, what I suggest is her academic premises actually are cutting across the disciplines, but her purity of academics is writ large. And she says the preciseness is very important as far as language preciseness is concerned. For communicating, correct pronunciation is very important. And that's why she says that to avoid mispronunciation, she has used dental retroflex to use the Pali language. Dental retroflex. I can actually go on to. The last contribution is her utopia. I think this I have taken from Begumpura, and I think you can also read. I think it's very, very challenging text to read because she builds upon not only Karl Marx's utopia, but also Karl Mannheim's utopia of ideology and utopia. And she argues that against the utopia of the journal masses or the upper caste, the journal masses, the Brahmins and the Gandhians, the Marxists, what is their utopia for Indian society? And she says that it is Kal Yuga. That is what actually they have made the utopia, Kal Yuga will come. Or they have also made Ram Rajya. That is actually the Gandhi's version of village Gram Swarajya, or Marxism, which will come, and Gandhism, and last but not least, Nehru's nationalism. These are the utopia given to us by the mainstream people or leaders or intellectuals. But against this, she is very, very clear and argues that Indian version of earthly utopia, Indian version of earthly utopia does not come from the elite literature, but it comes from anti-caste intellectuals with mass following, And that's where she has given that, beginning with the utopia of Begumpura, and she writes that Begumpura, the city without sorrow, is casteless, classless society, a modern society, one without mention of temples, an urban society. Begumpura describes land with no taxes, toils, and also where there is no hierarchy. That is Begumpura. That is the utopia given by subaltern. Second, she gives Sukhavati. Sukhavati is utopia given by Mahayana Buddhism. Then Tukaram's Pandharpur is another utopia. And the fourth, Kabir's utopia in the song of Amarpur or Prem Nagar. That is the utopia given by, the subalterns, anti-caste leaders with mass following. Last but not the least, she gives a vision by Jyotiba Phule, Ayotitas, Ambedkar, and Periyar, and argues that, they have all imagined a city, not a village. They have imagined an industrialized society where people will be getting their own prosperity, and they reject the village in terms of city. Such is the utopia and futuristic society which has been envisaged by Gail Omvedt in her writings. And that is why, friends, I argue that Gail Omvedt's construction of intellectual thought is more important. And that's where I'm reminded of Manavar Kashiram, because Kashiram used to say that in 1971, when he was doing field work, he met a girl who had come from US, and she was working on Jyotiba Phule. And our intellectuals, what are they doing? It is she who has given the teeth to our movement, because we have got the subject matter for our movement. And that's where Ambedkarite movement was extended to Phule Ambedkarite movement. But friend, I will finish, or I will end on a one note, which actually I could not ask Gail, and which still sticks to me, that why did Gail did not raise Baba Saheb Ambedkar's idea of nation democracy and nation building? I think that would have been taking Baba Saheb's ideas to a different level. Coming from US, coming from a very developed democracy, I think they should have seen. But she definitely has contributed. Her literature translations from Marathi, whether it is Tukaram's reading or it is Vasant Moon's autobiography, I think is another level of contribution. I think that's where I celebrate and salute to her memory for her contribution and making a parallel. It is not opposing the idea and ideological or any academic aspect. Rather, she has given a parallel construction of knowledge to the Indian knowledge system. That's what I celebrate, that it is a parallel and alternative knowledge system that we have to celebrate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vivekji. That is a wonderful summation of our, in a 20 minutes, you did a wonderful job. And the way you finished, she showed us a, alternate, production of knowledge, and, extending Ambedkarite to Phule Ambedkarite to, Narayan's guru to Ayati Das and Periyar. I mean, so made a very comprehensive what do you call, account of these great contributors into one ideology. That's actually a very, very remarkable. So thanks for that note. And we'll come back. I think there'll be a lot of discussion and questions. But before that, I want to. So Dr. Manisha, without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I would want to thank the organizers for inviting me for this August meeting. And I thank Dr. Vivek Kumar for a very laconic but very deep insight into what Gail Omvedt has done. So paying my tributes as well, I begin. I would like to address my meeting. I would request Dr. Venkat to give me a reminder 5 minutes before so that I am able to keep up my time. So I hope I have 20 minutes with me as well. Yeah. So around 15 minutes, you could give me a timer or a buzzer, and I should be able to finish it. I will divide my talk because this is to look into her activism side, into the field, how she has been, what has been her work. And I've had the privilege and a very good incidents to quote and remember in which I interacted with her. Of course, I'll be sharing with everyone. I'll divide my talk into 4 main points. One is how different she was from the rest of the intellectuals, whether they were Orientalist or in-house Indian intellectuals who were working in the field of sociology and socio-political science. A second point would be, how did the socio-political milieu of India, especially the activists, especially people who are working in the field of Bahujan movement, how did they benefit from her scholarship and her activism? Thirdly would be to see how she actuated her own vision of Ambedkar and Dalit vision and Ambedkar vision and beyond. She has a book by that name. So what was exactly that beyond? And fourth point would be, before I wind up my talk, would be to share my own experiences and our own conversations with her. So Professor Gail Omvedt, everybody knows her as being a prolific writer, as a sociologist, as an intellectual. But then it's so interesting that many, because here in India, the scholarship and the writing and the propaganda is usually manned by a particular class of people. They still label her as an American sociologist. So that is something which is, we have to dismantle that particular thing. But nevertheless, she was more of an original thinker, I believe, and not a person who was only a highbrow academic, ivory tower academic, but an original thinker who was looking into actuating and exerting whatever her research showed and brought about into the social movement which was going around her, of which she was an inseparable part. That is something which is very distinct about her. Mostly sociological studies and sociologists is something that the social scientists study the social movements after the social movements have passed on or have been conducted. Somebody is studying a non-Brahmin movement much later after 10 years or 20 years, or maybe writing about Miss Mayawati or Kanshiramji's movement later. That's how it generally goes. So they may not be the originators of the movement, but here we see a sociologist who was not only threading the existing knowledge, but also ingraining it with their own insights, very, very distinct and very formidable and very pregnant insights into making it very dynamic. So we see Gail Omvedt walking in tandem. Actually, she's bracing up. She is walking in conjunction with the social movements rather than following it up later on. And that, if you take from the time that she came, 1975, so initial 10 years go in her own study, but then subsequently she's walking in tandem with the social movements and the activists and people who are in the movement. It's also, the other thing which differentiates her is that she's not borrowing from the upper caste, upper class scholarship. She's not at all engaging herself in that futile activity, but she is creating her own knowledge and her own study, her own interpretations, and putting everything in her own hermeneutics, in her own perspective, gaining highly from the previous non-Brahmin intellectuals who have preceded her, or preceded here, whether it was the Bhumi of Maharashtra. Most of the body of work was in and around Maharashtra, but then it widened further on in the later years, as we see. Also, she was very categorically not giving any credence or rather attraction to the upper caste scholarship. And we don't see her doing that, which is a very, very fundamental thing which differentiates her from others. And then if I would like to, summarize her journey, taking not exactly Dr. Vivek Kumar has already elucidated very lucidly into how her contributions have been, in which way there have been. And he's really, shaped her persona in the current context, in the contemporary context. But I would like to, go a little different in a way. I would want to see her and chart her journey according to the books that she wrote. And that really give us a whole idea of her thought process, how her mind worked, what she actually did, and how did it go ahead, and how dynamic it was. And so I'll just briefly go, I hope the time allows me. So when she comes in 1976, so this goes from the, any academic coming from the US, coming in India, there are 2-3 things which are common with them. When it comes to the transformative movements, they usually come in contact with the communist, socialist movements, and usually come in contact with the upper caste, upper class people who are at the, heading the movement or at the hegemonical places of these movements. And then, however, she quickly dissociates from all of that and takes her own individual path. And then we have in 1976, so as soon as she comes, she talks about a cultural revolt in colonial India. And then immediately she diversifies herself from the existing upper caste feminist discourse and looks into violence against women in 1980. And then talks about smashing the prison in 1980 with her book. 1982, she talks about land, caste, and politics. That is again in the same arena of the socialist communist arena. But then from 1982 to 1993, there is a huge, almost 7-8 years of time in which she is seen immediately addressing meetings in BAMSEP convention. She is addressing meetings with local Dalit leadership, local Dalit activists, various meetings with OBC caste people, the Kurmis, the Kunbis. She's seen doing all of that. And then there are 2-3 books in the similar line. In 1993, then understanding how Phule Sahab and Periyar and Dr. Ambedkar's own socio-politics improved and improvised, and how it came on to the next level. She goes on into, she finds that there is nothing much difference on nothing tangible which is being done in the socialist communist sphere. And then she immediately wants to know what exactly has to be done. So she wants to reinvent revolution, and then talks about new social movements and social traditions in India. Now, this is a body of work that none of the upper caste, upper class people have done. And if you read the book by Brij Ranjan Mani, Brahminism, on the Brahminism, you would actually get a hang of what she was doing. And then in between, she talks about Dalit vision and gender and technology. Okay, subsequently, when we come again, she takes the same route. I mean, not exactly looking at or taking a direct cue from Dr. Ambedkar, maybe, but then that is how the chart of intellectuals are, especially the intellectuals who are honest, especially intellectuals who are integrinous, who are with integrity. They would want all those changes to happen in the society and have a body of knowledge which actually transforms lives. So then she talks about Dalit and democratic revolution, or Dr. Ambedkarite and the Dalit movement in colonial India, and quickly she jumps onto the solutions of the problem. And we see she talking about India, Buddhism in India later on. In between, definitely Jyotirao Phule and the ideas of social revolution seeking Begumpura. And subsequently, we see that Buddhism challenging the Brahmanism and caste, understanding caste from Buddha to Ambedkar, and beyond, that is in 2011. And 2011, again, building Ambedkar's revolution and talking about other Dalit intellectuals like Konkan Dalits and everything, how they have envisioned Dr. Ambedkar. Okay, so having said that, now, so we get a glimpse of her own journey, her own evolution as an intellectual, her own evolution as an original thinker, and her own evolution as an original thinker wanting to transform the society at her own level. Now, everybody knows that she was the partner and wife of Dr. Bharat Patankar. He was involved with the Shramik movement. Shramik movement is more or less, you would say, a very heavily communist-oriented movement. And then it's so interesting when I we see her not particularly getting influenced by it. As Dr. Vivekumar has already pointed out, she was very categorical in bringing caste and Brahmanism into the center stage, rather than and relegating class and all the socialistic formations and communistic formations into the background. Now, this is a phenomenal thing that we are benefited from. Going from this point immediately to my third point is, how did the activists and how did the people, whether academicians, especially I'm talking in context of the social activists and people like me, people like women in gender region areas, in various parts of India and especially Maharashtra, how did they benefit? Because I really do not have the time to give you the background and the dynamic upheavals which were happening all throughout, whether in the Maratha fold or OBC fold. But however, what I would talk about and what steps Gail Omvedt took would actually be able to tell us what was the reason behind that. So when we talk about how are the activists benefiting from her work, उसका कैसे फायदा हुआ, बाकी के लोगों को क्या फायदा हुआ? So the thing is that most of it found anchorage in her knowledge and in her books. Now we know that very well that if Dr. Vivekumar or if any other person from the Bahujan background writes a book, immediately if it's a transformative book, they will call in for a lot of backlash and a lot of flack actually for a prolonged period of time. However, here we see that she was saved from that, because being an American and coming here, she had that kind of a shield around her. So it saved her from all that. She could remain neutral and she could continue her work without getting totally distracted or being distracted by all these nonsensical backlashes and things like that. But more important than that, the academics and the social activists found a lot of credence and anchorage in her work, and found a lot of authentication to be given. So when she is writing, we have something to refer to, something to be talked about in the very contemporary, very current context. Of course, Dr. Ambedkar had written, Phule Sahib had written, Periyar has written, but that was something which was very much around us. Also, she is not seen to be flaunting the company. She was many a times, when you take the gender area of her work, she was in the company of upper caste and upper class feminists. But she did not make a hue and cry about it. She did not flaunt that company. And that's very, very important, because the amount of subversion and the diversion that this class of people have done for feminist movement in general has been quite destructive in a way, to a large extent. And her being very centered around her own scholarship and the scholarship of anti-Brahmin movement, even for the gender question, is very phenomenal, and it's very, very radical, I feel so. So that was one thing. Also, that was also the time when the Dalit, I really don't like that word. I don't use it very often, but what I basically want to carry forward and bring home the point is that the scheduled caste movement, more or less, or the Dalit movement was hinging around atrocities. That is where the Dalit Panther and most of the things, and some part of it was a literature also. But then again, that was to excesses of heinous crimes and things like that. But here we see that whether it was the socialist organizations or non-socialist organizations or Dalit organizations, they all come subsequently with her body of work towards a very intellectual and what you call a grounded and something which is rooted in historical perspective at the same time. Then there is a certain, and it did really have an effect. It did really have an effect, because that is a time when nobody wanted to give credence to Dr. Ambedkar and his work. Not until the volumes were published. There was a huge time which went on. किसी को पेरियार को उतना importance नहीं देना है, Dr. Ambedkar को नहीं देना है. So her work really mattered a lot during that time. I don't say that she was instrumental in bringing them forward, but at least she was able to place them where they're with giving due credit and where they belonged. And the importance of this particular activity can be gauged by the fact that we have Comrade Sharad Patil. Now, he's a very important figure and he has done a phenomenal work over there, and huge number of Adivasis and a lot of people who were affected by displacements and other social movements of which we were also a part. We saw that many Bahujans were influenced by him phenomenally, I mean, to a very large extent. But then when we actually deeply read Comrade Sharad Patil's books, we see that he takes a pretty anti-Ambedkarite stance, anti-Ambedkar stance, and very subtly, very deftly, very deeply, he goes on destroying quite a few works of Dr. Ambedkar. So when all these dynamics are working head and they're clashing at times, her work becomes a good anchorage for social activists. Now let me come to her beyond a part, the third part, and then I'll wind up with my personal experiences. The beyond part, when I say Phule, Ambedkar and beyond, that is something so cathartic, and it's so liberating actually, because that is something that we need today. That is something that we need to look beyond. When BAMSEF, of which I'm a part of, and when Kashiramji himself, talked about Mullivasi, he talked about indigenous people's right, he talked about the Bahujan name, the Bahujan word, and the Mullivasi, drew a lot of negative literature against it. Many socialists and many Bahujans from the Maharashtra were writing right, left, and center against it. And it was not getting that kind of this thing. But then what is Gail Omvedt doing around that time? She is talking about the same things, and she's documenting it, making a theory out of it. She says that the myths have been ruling people's mind all throughout, and we have been giving credence to them all throughout, and we have been silent over it, but we don't want to talk about it. So when I talk about Bali Raja, when I talk about the Onam festival, and I talk about the real Shramik of this country, you call it a myth, and then she goes on like with a vengeance kind of a thing in going and bringing this. I feel goes beyond Mullivasi concept. It goes beyond Mullivasi terminology, and she brings in Bali Raja. And then we have Gail Omvedt and her partner and many more people coming in with Bali Raja festivals all over Maharashtra, Bali Raja programs and things like that. So this is culturalization. So 1976, when she talks about the culture of the people, that we are not a people who only face atrocities. We are not only people who only face women issues. We are the people, we are having a culture. We are having our own hermeneutics. We are having our own philosophy. She raised the saints to the level of philosophers, to the level of intellectuals, to the level of giving a vision for the country, whether it was Tukaram, whether it was Kabir, whether it was Ravidas, whether it was and Amdev, all of this, Chokha Mela. And what were the saints called there? While giving a talk to the Sambhaji Brigade, or no, Tukaram Sahitya meeting, which was held in, I guess, 2012 or 2013. She talks about how the saint movement has been totally mollified. It has been totally malign to no end. And then she gives her own view and then presents all the saints, not only as a bhakti movement, people who have to be adulated or adored or idol worshipped, but real intellectuals. She brought them all into life. I wish I really could do that, but hopefully in form of an article, I'll bring all these things forward. But when she talks about the saint movement and the bhakti movement, she talks about the pratigami movement and the purogami, means the retrogressive saint movement and the progressive saint movement. And she
I forgot about giving you 5-minute warning, but anyway, yeah. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay, wonderful.
You're getting bonus.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had called for it, so that's really I'm thankful to you. So she brings Brahminism and caste into the center stage, and that is something which has acted as a what you call a new movement and a parallel movement, and giving an alternative to people. Because if we say that if not the Brahminism, then what? So here is your alternative. This is what it is yours. It is that you have to read, and it has to be reconstructed. It has to be adopted in form of either real beliefs or real observances. So that is something very tangible, nothing ideological or anything, very tangible things that she poses to us and she gives to us. And then finally coming to my own experiences with her. I am, before I joined BAMSEF, or around that time I joined BAMSEF, I was aware of the fact that she had been coming to BAMSEF meetings and many more meetings in and around Maharashtra. She was also traveling up till MP and Chhattisgarh and engaging herself with Adivasi movements even in Telangana and many more places. Now, I first met her in 2003. That is a time when she was writing about Buddhism and Phule Sahab's books. She was working on 2 books, and I met her at Manuski Center in Pune. Now, I found her to be, and we were sharing the same room because I had gone to Pune to attend the convention and also for a sociological study for which I was doing for BAMSEF. We were working on some project in and around the Pune Yerwada area. And despite the fact that we were sharing the room, I found her to be very disciplined, very focused on her writing. There was hardly, for 2-3 days, we stayed together for almost 5 days. For the first 2 days, there was hardly any pleasantry exchange. There was no question of any, normal exchange that happens between women. And I also, I found that very, fantastic because definitely I could really understand where she's coming from. And subsequently on the 4th day, then we start talking about, and then she is very happy to know that I've been working for BAMSEF and everything. And she's very happy to know about when I tell her that Sulochana Baidongre and her work with Dr. Ambedkar, who was the president of the 1942 conference. So when I tell her that I'm working on her and we are developing a documentary around her, so she's very happy to know that she wants to take a lot of information about it. And I give her the book. I thought that she's already aware about Mrs. Moon's book. And then when I tell her that Sulochana Baidongre happens to be my maternal aunt, so she's very happy. So I really treasure that memory when she wants to know more about my family and Sulochana Baidongre being a part of her family. Second encounter that I had with her was when she was addressing a camp, a training camp of BAMSEF in Pune. That was in around 2008, and subsequently once again in Nagpur, Ringnabori, when she had come to address another camp. In the last camp, she was her health wasn't very good. Last 2 camps, she was accompanied by Bharat Patankarji, and subsequently I've been following her very regularly, and with Bharat Patankarji also we've been connected, and I really find the Bali Raja movement and the Bali Raja culturalization of her work in that way, which is going on, to be very emancipating and very liberating. After her demise, there is one thing which I have to, rather make people aware, or rather have to be a little alert about the socialists and the communists usurping her legacy or usurping her work as being there of their own. So we shouldn't allow that to happen. I feel so it's important that our intellectuals be preserved in the way that they have worked. And during her own the journey, during her own funeral, we see slogans of Lal Salam and this and that, whereas a whole body of work has been of Dr. Ambedkar and this thing. These don't find really any places. So Ambedkarites and people who are in Bahujan movements have to be very careful, have to be very alert in these areas. With those words, I really thank all of you to have listened to me and given me the time to speak and share my work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Manisha. I think that was a very good account of some of the personal interaction and her work on the ground in India. So thank you very much, I think. Yeah, so I have, feel free to, from audience, you can raise your hand or type your question. I'll be, asking you to then, or comment, question or comment. Please feel free to jump in. This is, we want to make as rich interaction as possible. That's why I was trying hard to limit these speakers. Otherwise, both of them are capable of speaking hours together. But I have a, question. Whoever, see, in the context of actually, first question is, her professor Eleanor Zelliot, right? She was actually her, one of the first Western academician to really, write about, Ambedkar, and rightfully then Dr. Omvedt became a student of Eleanor Zelliot. So just in this context, it's very important to recognize and just to remember, any one of you, please can talk very, a few words about Linear Ziliad, okay?
I would
Please.
let Vivek
Yeah.
Kumarji kindly can take this.
Yeah, Dr. Vivek or any of you, just few words, because it's very, very important to even recognize and remember her also. And I think she was instrumental in driving Dr. Omvedt in the path that she has followed later on. So please, one of you.
I think actually Ziliot, as you know, that her work was a PhD thesis on Mahar movement. And Mahar movement actually, and that was not even published very long time. Long time after that, in 2005, she published from Blue Moon, which was not even knowing, and later on, that is now published by Namayana. But she came at that time, and I think she was also a contemporary to O.M. Lynch, and I think
got it. Lynch.
So that's what he also came in 1964. So
Right.
you know that I was publishing. So I think actually that she was one of the pioneers who started understanding Dalit movement in India. And she did not use the term Dalit, she used the Mahar movement, and her title was also the same. Right. So I think it is very important that there is a long line of that, but I think Gail broke all that because she married. We heard actually about Warrior Erwin, who was a male who came and married a tribal lady and stayed here and became a Gandhian philosopher, or actually a person who was talking about tribes. But Gail comes and marries a Indian and becomes a Indian. So that's what I think is a revolutionary and a very radical step for a because you can go from India and get married in US, but US person coming to India, it was something, a reverse migration, which was something very, very different altogether. And that shows her commitment to academics as well, because you have chosen the field actually. And she learned the language, and not only learning the language, but also translating it into English.
Wow, no, that's amazing. No, thanks for that note. So next question, actually, putting in the context of the time, right? When she came, I know especially the Naxalite movement was actually very vibrant, or starting to be vibrant. I come from Telangana hinterlands, I know. And then there is also this, even Maharashtra, there was a decent amount of Marxist activity at the time. And then there is a Dalit Panther movement, right? Between all these, she, like Dr. Manisha clearly said, she initial works were actually more influenced by socialist communist movement, but quickly, she focused, Ambedkar, Buddhism, and all these social reformers, and very anti-caste, and a lot of work. So anybody can give, maybe Manisha, you can give a little bit context. I get, Dalit Panther movement to this Naxalite movement, and then how the Ambedkarites, actually survived in Maharashtra with a little bit of, especially the Marxists, right? I mean, a place like us, if you go 20 years back, you would not know anything about Ambedkar, Phule, none, okay? It's all Lal Salam everywhere. So that so just give some context to that. That is very, very relevant, and that Gail, in that environment, she was able to bring out and focus on these, topics and interest, and pursued this interest in this area. So please, Manisha.
Yeah. So see, the thing is, though Telangana and Andhra Pradesh area differs from Maharashtra area, and despite the heavy socialist thing after Dr. Ambedkar had expired, uh, the, during the non-Brahmin movement, of which M.S. Guri, he's written a book on non-Brahmin movement, and uh, Gail Omvedt also writes about it. So all throughout, even during the time of Gandhi, whatever the influence of or work of communist and socialist was there, and that socialist communist work was mostly from the pen and mind of the upper caste Brahmins only, mostly. Okay.
Yes.
So that was going on, but at the same time, because the Satya Shodhak Samajist had again a lot of influence. They may not be in the mainstream. They may not have been be able to prevail over the other things. Why? Because Congress was politically very strong, and Mr. Gandhi had already entered politically. And the OBCs as well as other non-scheduled caste people who were not under the influence of Dr. Ambedkar's work and Dr. Ambedkar's leadership, they were already graduating or gravitating towards the Congress. But the Satya Shodhaks, and then they were very active, so it was always there. Then, of course, during the time of Ambedkar, it was there. And Dr. Ambedkar, during his lifetime only, was at the time his main attention was not so much towards the radical or what you would call retrogressive upper caste Brahmins, as much as he was against the Congress and exposing them as well as the communists. So that continued to happen. Even after Dr. Ambedkar passed away, Rajabhau Khobragade and other leadership of RPI, they continued their work for a certain time. It is after the first leadership of RPI went down and then the second level leadership came up, that is when the things started deteriorating. When Gail Omvedt came and things happened, at that time you would see 1973, already there was a churning going on in form of the backward classes movement, which is readily taken up, and leadership is given by Kashiramji and then D.K. Khapade. So we have about only hardly 10 or 15 years of time in which it is recognized very vehemently and very strongly that whatever the constitution had to be in the changes, whatever things were to happen, they are not happening. And this formulations, sociological as well as political formulations, are not being of any use to us. So all this was happening in each and every realm. And then 73.
I think she lost power.
Yeah, I think we are lost there.
Yeah, she will come back.
Yeah.
So anybody, I will open the floor to questions. Please jump in or comments. Gyan. Hey, why don't you just introduce yourself very briefly and then please,
Yeah, definitely.
Gyan, I don't know you, so
okay,
just for everyone. Yeah,
I'm Gyanendra Kumar. I came to know about Dr. Gail Omvedt around 2004, 2005 because I'm a person in life sciences. I did my PhD in life sciences from Indian Institute of Science. Before that, I was at JNU doing my master's. So I came to know about Insight Foundation and Insight Magazine when I was in ISC, and Anup had started that in JNU. And he had organized this program where he had also invited Dr. Gail Omvedt. So that's how I came to know about her. And then after my PhD, I moved to New York for my postdoc, and I met her daughter, Prachi Patankar. And so we used to meet often in programs at Columbia University and in a high school there, where we would organize a function in October for the Dhamma Parivartan Divas. And of course, Ambedkar's birth anniversary at Columbia University that we would organize every year. So I would meet her daughter, Prachi Patankar, there. So, but not being from the lives, from the social sciences or the political sciences field, I haven't studied her literature in any great detail. So I'm very thankful that Dr. Vivek Kumarji and Dr. Manisha Bangaji were able to give the deep insights from her, from Dr. Gail Omvedt's life experiences living in India and her immense intellectual work that she produced. So very thankful, and I pay my tributes to her for her great work. And thanks to Venkat for organizing this program and celebrating her life's work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gyan, for those comments. So thank you. Anybody, please open floor. I thought we'll have a lot of rich discussion. So please, if anybody comes in, one other thing, I want to know one thing. Yeah, Himanshu, go ahead and please, you can speak. You can unmute and speak. Hello, Himanshu.
Or Venkat, you can read his question.
Oh, you cannot speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It is a social justice and Dalit empowerment is the same thing or different streams. Social justice and Dalit empowerment is the same thing or different streams. Do you think Dalit movement should only be led by Dalit, or anyone can come together against injustice? Anybody you want to answer? Professor Vivek Kumar? Manisha is not here. She might come back.
Well, no, what I think is that, of course, anybody can lead the movement, no problem. But I think, when did social justice come? Because we know that social justice was not there. Democracy was only limited to equality, liberty, and fraternity. That was actually given. But if you see the preamble of Indian Constitution, I think Babasaheb Ambedkar has separately written social justice, equality, liberty, fraternity, and social justice. Why? Because Babasaheb knew that in a hierarchical society, equality will be only a slogan unless and until there is an equality of opportunity and equality of condition. And equality of opportunity is there in Indian Constitution, and yet there was discrimination. So he had to give representation, and that was reservation basically. So social justice is very, very important in a hierarchically arranged society, because if you do not give equal opportunity, then equality will remain only on papers. It will be only a theoretical premise, because there is no equality of condition. So I think equality of condition has to be given, and that was social justice, and that was self-representation. Now, going by that, actually, if you really want to dispense social justice, then I think there is a long history of debates and discussion that only wearer of the show knows where it pinches. If people have not sufferings, if they have not suffered the problem, and that's where the feminist movement started, that why the males cannot lead the females, because they do not know the pain and agony of the females. That's what Dalits argue, that you do not know the pain and agony, suppression, oppression, exploitation, and exclusion of the Dalits. How can you lead the movement? And also your construction of consciousness, as if you have read a little bit of Paulo Freire, who says that pedagogy of the oppressed will be written by oppressed only. Oppressor will not write emancipatory agenda. He will only write what is a reproduction of hegemony. And that's what we are seeing, that how different methodologies, functionalist methodology, consensual method, all is nothing but reproduction of hegemony of the power classful people. And therefore, oppressor knows how to lead and how to emancipate the oppressor also. That's what Paulo Freire's argument. So there is a long history which says that only wearer of the shoe knows where it pinches, and therefore he should be. In Hindi we say, jiska mudda uski ladai uski agwai. Jalebi ki rakhwali billiyon se nahi hogi, wo chat kar jayegi.
No, very well said.
Very well said. Yeah.
I think he's in. Okay. Anybody else?
So,
Professor, can I
Yeah,
speak?
please. Is it Chandrasekhar? You please
Yes,
type your
yes.
name. If you want to ask, I will call your name.
Yeah, yeah.
So Chandrasekhar,
I'm
you go ahead now, please.
I'm Chandrasekhar.
Yeah.
Professor at International Institute for Population Sciences and works in Department of Fertility and Social Demography. On this, I can only comment that because I generally, when I teach, because population is the subject where you don't have much more ideological fight, more technical field. But I would say that there are still rare measures to actually measure the intangible discriminations. So like, I have read tangible corruptions, some literature and intangible corruptions. So the government, many government or many institution have very well methods measures tangible corruptions, but intangible corruptions you don't still have measures. Same way discrimination, you don't have the intangible discrimination being done by from upper caste to lower caste. So what I would say that the question by Himanshu Chaudhary, the answer is that that a person of non this class or Dalit or maybe class cannot express those intangible discriminations, can express the tangible expression easily. And therefore this I leave as in scientific measures to develop in future. What are those intangible measures by which you can express these? For example, like you see Bihar or UP, because I come from Uttar Pradesh. If you go and say you are Tiwari or Shukla in office, without anything, if there is a Shukla is sitting, your work is done without giving bribe, that is called intangible discriminations. Thank you. Thanks. I am very glad to join this, and I know Vivek Kumarji long, but we don't interact because we are in different field. But I usually heard him because I come from Jatwa community from Western Uttar Pradesh, and we know very well scholars in JNU and around. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chandrasekhar, for that comment. And also, yeah, who else? Somebody else also wanted to comment. Okay. Hello? I think Manisha is not coming back. Okay,
yeah,
so yeah.
Yeah, so just Venkat, I just wanted to point out one thing is that today's is the 50th lecture in the Ambedkar lecture series by Boston Study Group. And there would have been, and there would not have been better way to celebrate this milestone than remembering and celebrating great sociologist.
Yeah, no, thanks for that reminder, Sanjay ji. So that's wonderful. So Dr. Manisha is back here. Hello, Manisha, can you speak? Where is she? I thought she was here. Okay, so I have, Manisha, so you're back, right? You can speak, okay. Yeah, so one other, when Gail Omvedt, basically when her, scholarship, how do we, put her, because I was just trying to, when you look at, Dr. Ambedkar's, scholarship, right? I mean, it's gigantic. I mean, then if you come on to, the generation between, after Ambedkar and this gap, those who scholars, who wrote about, the marginalized, the caste and, Dalits, Buddhism, I mean, she stands out for me. Okay. I mean, with a limited knowledge, I'm by no means an academician, by no means, I'm like a very raw techie. So with limited knowledge, looking back in those days, between 70s and what she has done is a tremendous contribution, especially in English literature, writing in English, right? So just throw some light on that, because how, I see most of you now, there's a vibrant, academic professionals and written a lot, but that's, only like I see like 20 to 30 years maximum, right? Going back. I think she started much earlier, and then she felt that after Baba Saheb she really stands out for me. So can you comment on that, please?
There are two realms in which I feel her contribution is of a very high magnitude, and which imparts, as Dr. Vivek Kumar did mention, and he made a point that nation, democracy, and nationality, all these things have become come very again back to the discourse, having a right-wing, ideology at work of late. Of course, those things are there. Those lacunae do remain. But one life and so much of work that remains to be done, and most of the times people are not able to do that. But what I feel is that we have to we can't say that after Dr. Ambedkar, there, especially from the Bahujan space, that there hasn't been a scholarly work as much as Gail Omvedt has done. It's not true. Many people have written, most of them, but of course in English, of course there may be.
That's what I want.
Yeah, in English, definitely, it is a benchmark that many would want to look up to, of course. But in vernacular, I mean, like if you take Bojat Arkam's work, and many more people up north, and L.R. Bali's, and I'm not talking about the Dalit literature, quote unquote. No, I'm talking about the visionary work. Okay, So nation, we can talk about nation either in form of representation, politics, so on and so forth, and then, or we can also speak of nation in the parlance of culture, symbols, unity, and hermeneutics, and bringing the entire peoples together, or rather a body of people's work. If that can be taken as a part of a nation-making work, then Begumpura, if we say that is also a nationalistic making, not nationalistic, a nation-making work. If in that way, I would say in the cultural realm, her work was phenomenal, and it is gigantic, and it's a definitely big milestone.
Okay, Dr. Vivek, you want to say something about?
And also, I'm sorry, I missed upon that. And also, upon for Dr. Ambedkar, when he talks about anti-caste or annihilating caste, he goes in form of three ways. I know, reconstructing the historical part, giving us the constitution, and talking about Buddhism and the Buddhistic, all major three areas and huge areas covering his entire life. So we have Gail Omvedt also going on from the visions, tracing out the historical part, putting it in well documented, scientifically documented structure, and then giving a vision, and definitely in that Buddhism comes. So whether we take it in form of a intellectual vision in form of Buddhism, or a cultural vision in form of whatever she has written, which I've already mentioned in my talk, in both the ways, her work definitely stands out. And in English, of course, it is a benchmark.
Yeah, thank you, Manisha. Vivek, do you have any comment on that?
I don't have to.
Hello, Dr. Vivek.
No, sorry. Actually, I don't have to. Don't have anything to add actually, because I was thinking that there will be a little bit more debate on the academics of it, but please don't test my knowledge of academics, because actually don't teach. Actually, that's the problem with me. But when people start teaching academics, then it becomes very difficult. One thing I would like to suggest that, historians have studied the terminated movements, never sociologists. Right. Sociologists have benefit to study the ongoing movements. And she was a sociologist, and that's why she had benefit to study ongoing movements as we have studied. So please correct yourself when you say that only, actually, she has studied. No, every sociologist has this benefit of studying ongoing movements. Not historians don't study. Historians study terminated movements.
Also sociologists. Okay, got it. That is
as far as nation is concerned, I do not find any definition of nation in Gail Omvedt's work. Baba Sahib has really defined what is nation and how to make nation. What is democracy? What is politics? That's what Baba Sahib has done. So please correct yourself when you say that no, she is also doing nation. No, not at all. She did not study, not even wrote a single line on what is nation.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody has any questions, comments?
I want to share my one line.
Please, Chandrasekhar. Yeah.
So I attended Ambedkar Memorial Lecture given by Gail Omvedt, and I was invited as a guest. We invite each other in our institute. Professor Ramaiah invited me. What I found that she was bold enough in front of all, that Tata Institute has many feminist, kind of around. She was very bold, so and honest, and her analogy to counter argument was so polite, so humble, which I feel like a scholar should have. And she has. I mean, after lecture, it was wow. I mean, I could learn many things, that how a person have such an great expression that everybody feel like this is what gender specialist or feminist should study, not what is being generally studied in university and colleges. That is what my experience. That was the lecture I attended, the last one in TISS. Thank you.
Yes, it's in Mumbai, right?
Yes.
It's in Mumbai, yeah. So, Manisha, you want to respond?
No, I want to dispel some misunderstandings, if at all, Dr. Vivek
Yeah,
Kumar
please
is
go ahead.
having
Yeah, no. I know you all have strong opinions, so go ahead.
No, not at all.
Discourse,
Not at all.
right. Yeah, go ahead.
Of course, Dr. Vivek Kumar himself has written a lot about it, and he is an authority, and nothing to counter him. No, not at all. But what I basically meant was, in the lack of time and the lack of the space that we are on online, discussions are not a very appropriate ways of having a very constructive debate. What I basically meant, and I was giving her credit for, is that Dr. Ambedkar's own definition of nation, nationality, people having associated living, coming together, having a feeling of togetherness and beating, all those things, if at all, those going back to those understandings of Dr. Ambedkar, then her work of a particular vision, as well as the forthcoming vision which she has given, that is making into a people, into a nation. That is what I meant. Otherwise, of course, you can go ahead with whatever you are understanding it. That is it.
Yeah. That's fine. Okay, thank you for that response. So I don't know if anybody again comments, questions, please. We have few more minutes we can spend. I think otherwise we can also. It's 1.5 hours since we started. I think that's a good time. I know some of you sparing your valuable afternoons, and I know it's getting late night in India, and so just I'll give 1 more minute if anybody wants to jump in. Otherwise, we can conclude. Okay. It's like we have no more takers. And
when are you coming to California, man?
Me?
Yeah.
We will come.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me. So I think let's conclude here. It was actually a very, very enlightening, and I learned so much. And I think it's a great way to celebrate Dr. Ambedkar's life and remembering her. Thank you for all those who joined and shared your valuable Saturday afternoon with us, as well as I want to thank Dr. Vivek Kumar, Dr. Manisha Bangar for those prepared remarks. I think we all learned a lot, and we all can really pay rich tributes to her in this fashion. So Jai Bhim, everyone, and thank you so much on behalf of Boston Study Group. I want to thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to you, and thanks to Professor Vivek Kumar ji also.